everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Ask a Sex Therapist. We have a special guest today who I'm excited to introduce. So Jackie Tempera is an award-winning reporter, copywriter, and storyteller. Using her razor-sharp writing, wit, and creativity, Jackie helps female leaders stand out in a world of endless options by finding the perfect words to communicate their special sauce with confidence and ease. When she isn't working with clients, Jackie writes about sexual health, body inclusivity, reality TV stars, and astrology for Women's Health magazine. Her writing has also been featured in top publications like USA Today, Harper's Bazaar, and Business Insider. So welcome, Jackie. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited too. We're going to talk about a broad range of topics today.
I'm ready for it.
Spectrum.
Throw them at me.
I feel like people are going to be like, well, you're taking us on a journey. And yes, we are. So one of the fun things about you, I think, is that you write something called horoscopes, spelled WHORO scopes. So that's kind of fun. How did you get into that? Are you like an actual astrologer? This seems like a fun job. Tell us more.
It is most definitely a fun job. So they are spelled the traditional way when I write them for Women's Health,
just on Instagram,
which is where I write them for. But for my own purposes, I do love to call them the horoscopes. Yes. I just think it's fun. Whores deserve horoscopes too.
Yes.
They need them. And I just think that's a lot of fun. But I've always been an astrology girl. I'm a proud
Scorpio rising here.
And I am also a Scorpio rising. So we have that in common. Yes, a double. So I was delighted when Women's Health asked me to start writing regular and sex horoscopes for them. It's just a fun way to learn more about it. But they have an astrologer who sends me the download,
so cool.
And then I get to spice it up, which is really fun. And then I obviously get the astrological forecast and can tell my friends, if they're going to fall in love.
I love it. So how much do you use astrology in your own love life?
Not at all. I would say no, that's not true. I think I definitely I'm dating someone right now, and I was definitely okay, he's got a July birthday. He's either a Leo or a Cancer. I'm hoping he's a Cancer. And then I found out he was a Leo rising, and I was like, okay, lots of confidence and energy.
Okay.
But it's something that I reference. I'll definitely do a birth chart check.
Okay.
I have my birth chart lady who does synastry. Her name is Kate, and she's fabulous. And she always runs my who's it's sort of what part of your life you're in and the planets and how they affect that relationship. So I do love that, but I'm not one to be I don't date Geminis.
No,
I
same.
don't date whomever. Yeah.
I've gotten more into it though. I use the app called The Pattern, which is pretty fun. Yeah.
I love The Pattern.
I'm this is very spot on sometimes. And it was making me buy more and more into astrology. And because it uses your exact birthday and time. I think where people go wrong, and I'm actually curious what you think with astrology, is they just go by the sun sign and they're like, it's so generic,
Yeah. Your sun sign is I don't know, arguably the least interesting part of your astrology, I think. There are so many different placements, and it's all about where all of the planets were when you were born. So that can have a huge impact. I mean, we think about the ocean and the tides, right? But you want to say there's no impact on our personal lives based on what's happening in the sky and the moon and all of these things when we're born. I think that's crazy. But yeah, I think once you get into exactly where you're born, the time you're born, then you can unlock all sorts of things. So for people that are interested in sex and love, Venus is the big sign for love and pleasure. So that's an important one to check out if you're not really feeling your sun sign represents your love life.
I'm trying to think. I think my Venus is in Libra. What would that mean? Do you know?
So Libra means you love pretty things. So for love, I mean, you're attracted to pleasure seekers. You're a pleasure seeker. you like aesthetically pleasing
sure
people
do.
and maybe like dates. I mean, who doesn't? But Libras especially.
I've been accused of that.
Those are kind of like those are kind of surface level ones. But yeah, that's a good one. I have a Venus in Sagittarius, which means I like adventurous people and things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. So we can all like look and see like where's our Venus and like what does this mean? And then what about our sex life? Is there a certain aspect or planet or house that we should?
So Venus is like love and sex,
okay,
I'd
cool.
say.
All right.
Yeah. So that's like the big one. If you're looking for advice in your love life, definitely check where Venus is right now and also where Venus is when you were born.
And are there any like favorite apps or websites or places people should check for these things that are like legit?
Yeah. So like honestly, just like Google birth like free online birth chart. That's what I do. I swear it's easy. It's usually I mean, they're correct.
I just did want to
because it's like all about timing. But I love the pattern. I love CoStar. I love the Chani app. Nice. Is a great one.
Okay, we'll link to some of these.
There's tons of
we'll put them in the show notes, people. So if you're like, how do I do it?
You're like, what the hell is she talking about?
Yeah, like we'll figure it out for people. We'll help them get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So that sounds so fun. I'm also wondering, how did you get into sex and love writing? Like, first of all, congrats. Like you write for an awesome magazine. You know, and that's how we met, by the way. So people who are listening, like, how do you know each other?
Yes.
I was quoted in one of Jackie's articles. So, and then we became Instagram buddies. And then I was like, I kind of like this lady and what she's all about.
I love to make a good Instagram friend. So I'm very happy we connected. And I think I interviewed you about falling in love.
I think I don't even remember. Like, was it oh, yes, it was
Falling in Love, but
I think there was actually 2 articles. Yeah.
Probably. I think one of them was maybe sex toys,
probably,
yes. And the other one was maybe falling in love.
Yeah, it was kind of like, what are signs that it's actually love and like not just, you know, infatuation?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can link to that too.
I liked that article.
I liked it a lot too.
Actually. Yeah. It was helpful. I was like, I had just met my current partner. So I was like,
oh, that's interesting.
I was writing it for the magazine, but I was also like, oh, let me like poll the audience. Am I in love?
I love when like your personal life and your professional life dovetail like that. You're like, oh, how nice.
Yeah, it was great. My editor sent it to me and I was like, you don't know what's happening in my personal life, but it feels like this is an attack.
You magnetized it though. I think that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
So how did you become a sex and love writer?
Right. So I definitely started on a way, way different path. I worked as a crime and breaking news reporter for many, many years in New England. So that's what I wanted to be when I was like a teenager. Well, when I was a little girl, I wanted to be Oprah Winfrey. I found out I was like, that's my girl. I like to talk to people. This seems like it'll be right up my alley. So I read a book about her for a book report and I found out she was a news anchor. So then I was like, okay, cool. That's what we'll do as well. And I really fell in love with reporting. I love talking to people. I love interviewing and just like really pulling out the interesting pieces of people's stories and like reflecting those back to them. So I loved doing that. And while I have so much gratitude for the time I spent doing like courts and crime reporting, it did ultimately become really triggering and really emotionally difficult for me. So I had to take a step back and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, honestly, because I was like, this is it felt like my whole identity was interviewing people and being this reporter, like Lois Lane girl. And one of my great friends, Lindsay, works at Women's Health, and she kind of knew I was going through a time, and she was like, hey, why don't you write about like, I think it actually was a story about Venus for Women's Health. Like, you have a funny voice, like just have fun with it if you have time. And I was like, okay, that'll be cool. And that was probably like, I think that was like 5 years ago at this point. So I just started taking on more and more stories. And then as we'll get into later, I'm a sexual assault survivor. So healing from that really highlighted the struggles that I was having in my own sex life and made me more open to talking about it. So I think that naturally kind of led me into wanting to help other women just like be able to talk about sex and love more openly.
Which is amazing. It
Thank you.
is. I mean, and I know like being a writer, even though you do seem to have a great gig, is not always easy.
No.
You know, like a lot of hustling and not always the most stable thing. But obviously, you know, you're preaching to the choir with me. Like, I think it's so important to get stuff out there about sex and relationships. And you know, your magazine is read by so many people, which is, you know, really cool and impactful. So so I love that. Do you have any favorite things to write about?
I definitely love astrology. Okay. I like articles like I honestly really like articles like the one we worked on about like how to know if you're actually falling in love, where it's just like more practical advice. Because these are the questions that we like Google when we can't sleep, right?
100%.
Like, it's like, how do I know if this is a real relationship or they are just like want a physical relationship? Like, these are the things that we're like searching and maybe are even too afraid to ask our friends about. So I like have definitely like stumbled upon like, how do I know he likes me? And then read one of my colleagues' articles and I was cute. Like, thanks, girl. But I like to be that resource for people, to be that like, I don't know, like big sister or whatever it is, to just kind of like give you the down low. Because when we did that article, there were so many things about like neuroscience and just like feelings in your body to like know when you're really forming that kind of a strong bond with someone versus when it's more of a surface level relationship. And that, I mean, who couldn't benefit from some of those tips?
I totally agree. I liked it because it was more of a mature version. Like, I think about those articles that are like, Sciencey likes you, you know, and you're like, okay, like that. I can't believe I'm doing this sometimes. No, but yours was like, oh, this is quality information. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I like was born and bred on like 17 magazine and like Tiger Beat, where it was like 12 ways to know if he thinks you're cute. So I like to that I'm kind of doing that, but it's like in a little bit more of an elevated thing, elevated way, which is like a huge testament to my editors at Women's Health too. They come up with really, really awesome ideas, and they have a really great pulse on their community and what women are talking about and wanting to learn more about. I love that.
And so since you've been doing this for like 5 years or so, is there anything surprising that you've learned about, you know, sex and love and relationships?
Oh, I mean, so many things have been surprising. So like I said, I started doing reports. So I've been a reporter for 15 years, but then took this like pivot to sort of like sex, love, lifestyle, like you said, about 5 years ago. So I would say there's like so much that you don't know about sex when you're just like a regular person going about your life, I think. I was born and raised like Catholic, so it wasn't like a very open situation growing up. So I think like I said, like through healing from sexual assault, I kind of had to get real with myself and talk about like, okay, what do I find pleasurable? Like, what are the things that I like during sex? What are the things that I don't like? And I had to get really clear on that. So then that kind of like opened the door to like all of these different things, whether it be like tantric or kink or using toys or things like that, where like, I don't know, I was kind of sheltered before and I was like terrified to go into like a sex shop or even like talk about anything like that with a girlfriend. So I think that the most surprising thing to me is like how powerful like your sexuality and like learning to like lean into it and really like learn who you are as a sexual person, how powerful that is in your whole life, because I think it contributes so much to our confidence as human beings. So I don't know that I think I learned that through writing and through just like lived experience.
That makes sense. And I do think they dovetail together, you know? And I feel the same way. It is interesting how our journeys are also kind of parallel. It's like, I also grew up Catholic
I know.
And then now, you know, talk about sex for a living. It's like accidental or not accidental. I mean, I think it's part of the story. It's like, I was pretty freaking, you know, repressed for a long time.
I was very scared.
Same. Yeah, I had like a lot of anxiety about like getting pregnant and like getting STIs, and there's some, you know, kind of paranoia around that.
Yeah, no, I was definitely operating around like that Mean Girls quote, like, if you have sex, you will get chlamydia and die. I was
Same.
like, okay, you've got it.
Yeah, here we are, still
Word.
kicking.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I
Yeah,
was wrong.
we're doing
Imagine.
okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, I was even discovering that like there's so many benefits to sex and to orgasm and to just touching, and there was just zero focus on that. It was like fear after fear and terrible thing and ruining your life, and to kind of discover like, yeah, you have to like be a mature adult and have adult conversations to navigate the safety elements, but like there's a lot of benefits.
Oh, totally. And I think like you just said, like I think if you can't talk about sex like with your partner, like you shouldn't be having sex.
That's my
I
thought
really
too.
think that. Like if you can't have like a normal
Yeah.
conversation about it, you're probably not mature enough to be
Yes.
engaging in it in a powerful
exactly.
way.
And I'm baffled though. I mean, a lot of like seemingly mature people have sex and like never bring up the safety conversation. So if you're listening to this is not to shame you, but like please have that conversation.
Just have a
Yeah.
chat.
And I mean, half the
doesn't have to
time,
be
at least the
scary.
other person's going to be like, oh, thank you for bringing it up because I'm not good at bringing it up, you know? And if they react poorly and they're like, no, I refuse to use any kind of protection or I won't do this or that, then like, this is not someone you want to have sex with. And bullet dodged.
Yeah, I think that there is so much to like just being straightforward about everything in relationship, but like particularly around sex, like you vet people so much faster. Like if you have a simple boundary with like physicality, like let's say, I don't know, you don't like your hair being pulled, and the person that you're talking to is like, well, that's a deal breaker for me. Like I have to pull your hair every single time. Da 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 da. Like it goes off on you. It's like, okay, well, how are they going to react when you set a boundary about like, I don't know, like housework, finances, any of these big things. So I think it can be sort of like an entryway. And we think of sex as so casual, I think often, but it isn't. It's an important and like, I don't know. I don't see it as a casual thing anymore.
I think that's a healthy approach. It's like it's intimate. It's like no matter how you slice it, like even if it's like a one-time thing and you never see the person again, it's like you are exposing yourself to the risk of disease or infection. You are, getting naked with someone. You are often, penetrating or being penetrated. Like these are not actually like super chill casual things, generally speaking.
No, it's like arguably the most vulnerable you can be with someone.
Exactly. So I appreciate you saying that. Okay, so let's segue into the recent article you wrote about sexual assault. And first of all, I just think like, wow,
Thank you.
Really? It's like, and I think I get this because like I am also someone who puts myself out there in a certain way. But it's hard. It's hard to kind of put yourself out there, let alone share such a vulnerable story publicly. But I'd love to hear about like, how long did you think about doing it? What made you decide to actually go for it? And how did you get it published and all the things?
Yeah, so I will say that I have been writing on this topic, like just like alone in my bedroom and like alone in my writing groups that I do for, I've been writing a version of that essay at least for like 6 years. And I've been like talking about how I would begin to share this. It's something I've wanted to share because I know I have a platform. I reach a lot of women through my work on my business and then through women's health too. So I know how important it is to talk about it. But obviously when it's you that it's happened to, there's a whole different set of challenges and triggers and just like emotional stuff that comes with it. So I would say the writing process of it and like the processing, because I do process my feelings through writing, started probably shortly after I was sexually assaulted. So about 6 years ago. And I've just kind of like let myself not really have a format for it and just like kind of let it fly. And I have like, I don't know, I hope to write a book one day. I will write a book one day about the experience of like healing from that, because I think it's like you're literally like kind of like rebirthing yourself, I think, after an invasion like that. So the writing took a long time to answer that in a shorter way. And I just like was always feeling like I was never ready to share it. I was like, oh, I'll wait until I have a therapist that I see like once a week, or I'll wait until it's X number of years out, or I'll wait until this. And then I just had an opportunity. An editor said, who was familiar with my story and who had read some of my like previous essays, just like from me sharing with her, mentioned that they were doing this package on pleasure, and what I write about like how my relationship with like pleasure and satisfaction shifted after I was raped. And when I got the email, I was almost like, nope. I was like,
pass on that.
No, I will not be doing that. Like, sounds cool. But I had to really be like, all right, like, you know what? You're never going to be 100% ready for something. Like, you got to just do this. Like, I knew it was a powerful opportunity. And through the whole process, I was just like, if I am able to reach one woman with this story, because it was about ways to reconnect to your body and enjoy sex after assault and trauma. If I could reach one person who felt the way that I did at that time, then this will be worth it. And I've gotten a lot of really great feedback, and honestly no negative feedback at all, which was some of my my fears in publishing it, you know. But it was pretty incredible. I got to interview the women that I did group therapy with at the Boston Area Rape Crisis Center for the piece. And I hadn't seen them since I was literally in group therapy with them 5 years ago. So it was just like the craziest experience to be like interviewing them rather than like me sitting in their room, like, I mean, truly just like crying and just having a time. I mean, that was truly the lowest point of my life was with those women, and they helped me out of it. So
that's amazing.
It's been a really beautiful full circle moment, but not without a lot of challenges. Personally.
I can imagine that. I just think it's so cool that you did it. And I love what you said about like if one person benefits from this. And I think that with sex, part of why I went into this field is because I think there are so many sort of dark, shadowy, unconscious areas of sexuality, with sexual assault being one of them. And the more we take those things out of the shadows and talk about them freely and shine some light on them and realize that there is love and support there, you know, for us, I think the more we're able to heal some of those parts, you know? So I guess I'm curious, like, do you feel like it was even like further healing to write the story?
I love that question, because when I was doing it and like I hopped on the call with the counselors, I was like, oh, this is a beautiful full circle moment. And I'm so proud. And that, like, all of these things, which is true, which is definitely true. But while I was interviewing them, I started to like dissociate and kind of like leave my body. And I felt a lot of the same, I mean, like the like post-traumatic stress syndromes that I experienced after my assault. So like having like a racing heartbeat, not being able to focus, like losing my place in the conversation. So I went into this interview thinking like, oh, what a triumph. And then halfway through it, I was kind of like, I don't even know what I'm asking you guys anymore. I'm sorry that I'm a little disoriented. And one of the women, Shadi, she said to me, you know, like, this can be a full circle moment, and it also can be incredibly difficult and painful. So like hold both of those for yourself. So that was a really, really beautiful moment. And they just, it was helpful to have them, because they were truly the people that worked with me on this. And while it was many years ago and they've been through like probably dozens of iterations of my group program since then, there's no one that I would rather have been in that space with, for them to like hold me back, because that's not usually the source's role in a reporting, right? Like, you don't want to be like your source to be comforting you, but I needed that support, and luckily I was able to have
that. Makes sense. The media added a little safety in that they had been your support team. But I appreciate you being so real about like, yeah, it's full circle, but that doesn't mean it wasn't triggering in some ways.
Yeah, no, I definitely like spent a couple of days in bed and felt like scared and like vulnerable, and all of those feelings come up again. And like that's what we talk about when we talk about being triggered, right? I think that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I always like to just clarify, like, my meaning of triggered is that I feel as if I'm in that unsafe place that I was in during my trauma. So that's what it felt like, even though I was sitting on a Zoom like this talking to two women I love. I felt like I was like under attack and my body is doing that like fight or flight. And I'm just like, damn it. Like, I'm just trying to have a good conversation here and celebrate this moment. But the body doesn't know that.
Help other humans, you know?
Yeah.
You're right. The body doesn't always know that. And one of the things I do with people with internal family systems, which is, you know, a form of parts work, is sometimes go back and find those parts that are, you know, stuck in the past and kind of bring them into the present. And so it can be a really good method for trauma and for recreating safety through our own self energy. So the idea of it is that like self energy is like calm and confident and spacious and unaffected by trauma, which I love that because we've all had trauma in various forms. But yeah, so I love that we're able to kind of recreate that safety. And so I'd love to hear from you, like, what helped you recreate some safety in your healing process?
It was a lot of different things. So any survivors that have access to group counseling and like personal therapy, I recommend it wholeheartedly. Like, I was really afraid and almost didn't do it because I thought it was going to interfere with my work as a journalist. I was like, oh, I won't be able to interview the Rape Crisis Center anymore because of a conflict of interest. I shouldn't go. And thank God a friend of mine at the time was like, Jackie, that is stupid. Go.
Yes.
So I was like, yeah, you're right. I didn't really need to interview them that much anyway. But so that's was one of the big ways. And I think that just like showed me during our first session, we were handed like a piece of paper that was like, here are all the symptoms of sexual assault trauma or sexual trauma. And I was in a room with 10 women who had also experienced, I was one of 10 who had also experienced that. And I just like watched as all of us checked off almost every single thing on the box. It was like complete dissociation, like being depressed, like stomach problems, headaches, all of these different things. I wish I had the list in front of me right now. But being in that environment was so affirming because we were all pissed, right? Like when I was checking off this thing, I was like, are you joking? Like this asshole who did this to me, like is now forcing me to have all of these symptoms of something I didn't, you know, I wouldn't have had to deal with otherwise. And while that isolated, if I was alone by myself feeling those feelings, I think that would have been terrifying. Being in the group made me realize like, oh, this is not unique to me. This is something that's unfortunately universal to many victims of rape and sexual assault, because there is a way that your body responds to it and there is a way to heal from it. So like your question was like, how did I heal from it? Was really like investigating my thoughts around it. I felt like it was, I think this is super common. Like it was my fault. I should have been more careful. So sort of unpacking that with the group and like really interrogating the evidence behind that statement was something that we did in therapy that I found really helpful. We did an exercise where we needed to share our story with the group, which was probably the hardest thing that I have ever done. That was the first time I had shared it in any sort of like public context other than like to my closest family and friends who were like therapists. So we did that, like sort of desensitizing ourselves when talking about it. And then we did a lot of like somatic work. We did like self-touch. There was an exercise where we ate like a Jolly Rancher very, very slowly, which sounds super silly. And it was definitely like we were all like giggling during it. But it was just this like reminder that like you can be slow and intentional and even sensual with something as silly as like a candy. Like you can slowly peel off the wrapper and like hear how that sounds and then feel how it tastes in your mouth. And it's like these are the little tiny steps that we kind of dip our toe into before it's like, okay, I'm gonna get back on the apps and like do my thing and like dive back into this like in a full force kind of a way.
That makes so much sense. And I mean, I've done a similar thing to the Jolly Rancher with a raisin. It's kind of like a meditation.
Yeah, there's lots of strawberries. There's a lot of meditation with
but
that
I can
too.
see it at least kind of being like, this is a safe way to connect to your senses and connect to your body again.
And
I
silly.
like that is kind of silly.
Like we were like, it was just a group of girls like just like, oh, like look at my sexy Jolly Rancher over here, like let me peel it off nice and slow. Like it was funny and it was really healing. So it was like in those like lighter moments that we found healing. And also just the counselors were so knowledgeable. I didn't really, even though I had reported on sexual assault for most of my career, that was like one of my niches, was talking about speaking to women who had been harassed or assaulted, because I just knew how pervasive it was.
So pervasive.
So insanely. So I like literally had like maybe 2 months before written an article where I had a fact box of like, here's the things to do if you've been assaulted, and like ask me if I did any of those things for a year afterwards, because I didn't even believe that it had happened to me.
Wow.
So it's like just like the education of like the impact on the body was transformative.
That's interesting what you just said about not believing it had happened for a year. Can you like talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think I remember the day after this happened, I said to my friend, like, something weird happened last night. Like, without getting too into the details of my story, someone like had sex with me while I was asleep. So I woke up and I was like, something weird happened. Like I was asleep. I wasn't totally there. Like that seems strange. And I remember my friend's face kind of like falling and being like, oh, I think that's something more than like weird. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to think about it. And then I didn't want to leave my house anymore. I didn't want to talk to my friends. I started pushing away my family. I wore really baggy clothes all the time. I became terrified that people were going to push me down a flight of stairs. And there were just all of these to me at the time, they seemed like strange, like new anxieties I had. And I couldn't even relate. I was like, what's going on with me? Like, what's happening? And then it sort of hit me. I had shared it with another friend and she was like, yeah, that's not a weird experience. Like that man raped you. Like that's what happened. And like having it thrown at me so bluntly, I was like, okay, yeah, this is how I need to accept this so I can like work through it. So it's like, of course I knew it had happened on like an intellectual level, but to like really understand and like grapple and accept that fact is sometimes half the battle, I think.
I think so too. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing what that period was like before you kind of came to terms with it, because I think a lot of people go like that their whole lives probably, you know, and just kind of make their world smaller. And I very much share the anger that you expressed of like, okay, so someone did this to me, and now I'm the one who has to kind of like do all the work to undo this harm.
Oh, it was, I still am furious.
Me too. I'm furious on your behalf and on behalf of all people who have been assaulted.
On behalf of everyone, not just, I know I'm far from alone in that feeling. And it's like, feels very frustrating. It feels like, I mean, understatement of the year, right? But it's like this, it's almost like this brick fell out of the sky and now I'm like dealt to like pick up the pieces. But of course it's not. It's someone took a conscious action to perpetrate a crime.
Exactly.
You know?
Right. Probably thinking that, you know, they're not going to have any consequences, but I hope they did.
And he didn't. No, he had zero consequences, even though I reported it to the police, unfortunately. Yeah. Which is, again, another reality for survivors.
I mean, even the fact that you reported it is more than most people do.
Yeah, and it was super unpleasant. I wrote an essay about this that hasn't been published yet, but I felt like I was like ordering a burger. I was like literally next to a man who was fighting a parking ticket and was like telling the police about like he had intel on the assassination of JFK. I was living in Boston at the time, so they're like into that. So that's on my right. And then the police officer in front of me at the window is like, and how much do you weigh? And how much did this man weigh? And can you explain what sex means to you? Like, I need you to be very, very specific because it could mean different things to different people. Like, it's just out in open air.
Oh
we
my
weren't
God.
in anything. So it's like, when people wonder, like, why don't more people report? It's like, does that sound pleasant to you?
Yeah. And I'm not surprised. So I was a high school counselor, and sometimes I had kids report child abuse to me, and the police would come in. So I witnessed like how the police talk to people who are dealing with trauma. And that was in more of a closed room with an advocate present. So I can't even imagine, you know, trying to do that like on your own in a public forum. I think it's a testament to what a badass you are.
Thank you. It didn't really feel like it at the time, but looking back on it, I feel really, really proud of that. Like 25-year-old version of
like
Jackie.
That to me, that's like you're really showing up for yourself and like big time in that moment.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like it then. I was like, was motivated by the idea that like at least if he did this to someone else, there would be a record of it.
That's actually a really good point. You know, and different situation, but I had a little bit of sexual harassment from a neighbor, and I talked to a friend about it. And this story is also, this conversation is reminding me of how important friends are. You know, you've mentioned a couple friends who are really instrumental in you like getting some help and figuring out, you know, what was going on. But I mentioned it to a friend, and she was kind of like, Heather, that's not okay. And you need to tell the property management of your building, because there's a chance he's done this before. And in my mind, and I think there's a culture around this, and so this is why I'm saying this, but in my mind, I was like, probably not, or, you know, there's like a dismissiveness, because I think there is a desire to like not believe the worst in people, or not believe that like something bad really happened to you. And so if it hadn't been for her saying this, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it to property management, but I did. And he had done it a handful of other times since he lived in the building. And my property manager was a badass, and immediately she like didn't even wait to hear back from me. She like tried to wait a couple hours. She's like, I couldn't wait any longer, Heather. And she went and served him a warning that if he does one more thing, he's evicted.
Yeah. And that's, you know, women helping women.
Absolutely. And yeah, so I love hearing like the friend's role in your story. And I think it's just important to kind of, for people to understand like their, you know, our parts, I think, are protective mechanisms in an effort to keep us safe, you know, might develop more anxieties, might deny that something that bad actually happened, might not want to speak it because it makes it more real. And like that's all okay. And that's stuff to be aware of, you know. And we'll also link in this episode. So if this episode, you know, is like making people realize stuff they've been burying for a long time, you know, I know you mentioned like the resource center that you went to, you know. So we'll link to that one.
Center, but there are in many cities.
Yeah, and we'll try to link to like a national like finder of resources if we can. But it's like there is help out there. You know, I work with people who have experienced sexual trauma, and I also want to say, I don't think there's a woman out there who hasn't to some degree.
Oh, I think that's another thing is like once you start diving in and you're like, oh, this is what consent is. Like it's pretty clear. And there are definitely many other points in my, you know, sexual career where I would say, I look back on it now and I'm like, that didn't feel great. Like that one didn't look awesome. I'm sure any woman can relate to that. And any person. I don't want to say it's just women too.
Right.
Because there
Absolutely,
are a lot of
any person.
men who experience assault.
100%.
And even more stigmatized in some ways. But yeah, it's like we're not really trained on what's right and what's wrong because sex can be so taboo. But there's this one quote about assault that my counselors provided me that like has always really helped me to clarify it for myself is because I think a lot of the feedback I've gotten in my life is like, oh, well, like, why do you still like having sex if you were assaulted, or like, I'm surprised you like X because of this. And I want to like make this distinction that like rape is not sex. Rape is a crime where sex is used as the weapon. So there are not it's difficult to kind of conceptualize that with other crimes, but I think that's a really powerful one to sit with.
I appreciate that. And I do think that's super important. Rape is not sex. Sex is when you decide to do something with someone.
Yeah, sex requires
Right.
consent. Rape is an attack.
Completely different. Because I have had people say, oh, the first time I had sex was rape. It's like, nope, that was not the first time you had sex, you know?
No. I mean, yeah, that's a horrible thing to feel, but yeah, that's not sex.
Exactly. So then how did you kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, you've healed enough and you've had this group experience and, you know, you're working with your thoughts and kind of reclaiming your power and getting out of some of the anxieties that, you know, you had. How do you go from there to like actually enjoying sex and like experiencing pleasure again?
It was a slow build, I'd say. Lots of like worksheets that I had a very supportive partner at the time who did like a lot of work with me. So it would be like, is this something that you would enjoy? Is this something that you wouldn't enjoy? And we kind of just like took baby steps. And then, I mean, through the years, I think it's just been something that like I've had to get really comfortable talking to people about it, potential partners or just people in general, because there are certain boundaries that I have because of that experience that maybe I wouldn't have before. And there is a certain level of presence that is important to me during intimacy that maybe I wasn't as focused on before, you know, like I don't like it when people are watching TV or like have things on in the background or like things like that. I mean, I think most people probably don't like that. But I like when someone's very present with me and there with me, so I don't kind of like veer into a potentially triggering scenario. And of course, I still do get triggered, like 100%. Like that definitely still happens to me. I just have more self-regulation tools like breathing, you know, like the classic like grounding into your five senses. Like, yes, I'm sure you're familiar. I'm sure you could tell me a lot more. But yeah, I have different regulation tools. And like, also, I know that I can say like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Like consent can be withdrawn at any time. So I think just like a lot of it was the therapy and just like rebuilding my confidence. I've done a lot of work in my life to like rebuild my sense of self and my belief in myself, because that was really shattered after that experience, unfortunately.
That is so real. I think what you just said, like your belief in your self being shattered, because it's like from an external perspective, I think and hope most people listening can be like, you did nothing wrong. You're just doing all this work to heal. But I do think when you go through that, it can sometimes be like, how did I let this happen? Or why didn't I catch this or that? Or like, you know, was my judgment off? Like, you know, there's kind of a questioning of yourself sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that part of that is like not wanting to think that it could happen again, or that it's like that random bad things happen to people. I think that's really, really scary realization. Like you were saying, like to lose that faith in people or to think that people are capable of evil. I don't know that I really thought that before this experience. Maybe I lived like a very like blessed life ahead of time, but I kind of always saw the best in people and I still try to. But this was like a rude awakening for me, you know, to like be like, okay, now my worldview has shifted and my view of myself has shifted. So how do I get back to being a person who's loving and who's not jaded and who's not skeptical of every man? Because that's not fair either.
I don't know. Listening to this, I'm like, I feel like we could have a whole podcast.
I could keep going.
It could be a whole podcast with many episodes, you know, on this topic, because there's really so much there in the details. But I think like hearing what you just said, to me, what sticks out is the intentions, like getting really clear on your intentions and like where you want to head. Sounds like it was really important for you.
Definitely. Like, I think, like being like, I want to be able to enjoy sex with a partner again was like a general goal. Right. So I took small steps to get to that goal. And then, you know, you set your next goal after that, which for me is like speaking about it. So once I kind of was able to like actually engage in sex again after this and like get my life back, I knew, yeah, I wanted to share and I wanted to be able to help others who maybe recover a little faster.
Yeah.
You know?
And I do think when we kind of touched on this a moment ago, but like helping people understand really what's okay and what's not okay. And, you know, one of the things that bums me out, and maybe you could help with this based on your skill set, but one of my lowest download episodes is my consent episode. And, you know, I'm kind of like, what does that say? I think it's like an uncomfortable topic. Maybe it doesn't seem as sexy on the outside. I literally think it's the foundation of all sexiness. And so I do want people to understand that. And so part of it, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to package this differently. Maybe I need to trick people into learning about consent.
No, we do.
Jackie's going to help me trick you guys, okay, but in a nice way.
in the best way possible. I think that consent on its own, it's like, it doesn't sound sexy, right? Like, yeah, of course, like people are going to be like, oh, the BDSM episode, click, like consent. I went over that in middle school or whatever. But consent is like so sexy. Like consent is like the moment that someone's like, yeah, like I do want you, like, and I want you to do these things to me, and I want to do these things to you, and like that's like the most exciting part. So like, I mean, for me, and I don't know how you feel about this now. Download the episode.
For me, it's like there's a direct correlation in like how safe I feel and like how slutty I want to be with you. Okay.
100%.
People listening, did you hear that? We both feel the same way. So I think it's worth it for people to put the effort into, how do I make my partner feel really safe? Like, what are some ways that I can create a container, so to speak, of safety in our sex life? So did you have any thoughts on that? Like, what could a partner do who wants to create a safe space?
I think just like communicating is so huge, like, and like talking about people, like talking about their edges. So like in that article, I said, like, I don't like people to touch my neck. It sends me into fight or flight. And like, that's something, like, this is very personal, but that's something that I'm working on because I don't necessarily want that to be something that's blocking me. So it's like, I'll take little tiny actions. Like my partner will place his hand on my chest and he'll be like, how does that feel? And I say, okay. Or sometimes I'm like, no, go away. I don't want that. So it's like, it's a lot of trial and error. I think for a partner, there's a lot of resources and a lot of research you can do about, like how people's brains change after assault and like what the impact is to try and create that safe space. But I think the number one thing is just truly talking, because every person is going to be different and everyone's boundaries and what makes them feel safe is going to be different. But yeah, I think for me, like the sexiest thing is having someone who's like willing to do that work with me and take the extra steps to make me feel safe and secure and like ensure that we're going to have that like co-create that experience together.
That's where the fun is, I think, you know. It's
and also like to the survivors, like it's not on you it shouldn't always be on you to like curate the perfect experience for yourself, sexually or otherwise. Like your partner can and should do some research. It's not hard.
Absolutely.
You can do Google. I'll send you my article.
So send your partner this episode, and this could be a jumping off point. But I do think things like podcasts and articles are a good starting point because they're like neutralized, you know? And so it's like, okay, let's just both, you know, read this or listen to this and no one gets defensive. It's just like, okay, this is like a neutral piece of content. And then it could be a jumping off point for a conversation.
Yeah. And it's also probably more entertaining than like the academic article.
Well, I mean, that's probably true. Yeah. Yeah. I probably wouldn't go with an academic article, although I'm sure there's some good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some,
I get
some
bored
bangers.
very easily though. My eyes just glaze over.
I get that.
But okay. Well, this has been incredibly helpful. I just want to thank you for, again, your bravery, your vulnerability, your strength, and helping to educate people about sex and relationships in general in your career, sharing your specific story here. I feel privileged that you were willing to share it here. So thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, speaking of safe spaces, like, thank you for making this one for me. I was definitely a little nervous talking about this. It's definitely very personal and scary, but I am, committed to sharing more this year and hopefully helping others in the process.
Really incredible.
So thank you for
and if people
listening.
want to find out more about you, about your work, check out your articles, where can they find you?
Oh, they can head over to jackietempera.com or follow me on Instagram at jacktemp. And I have all of my different things there. I have my group coaching, a lot of different free resources for storytelling. And then I always link my articles.
Okay.
Too.
All right. We'll link to that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for being here, Jackie. And thank you everybody for listening. Catch you next Monday.
Thank you.